Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today my guest is Shelly Mittal, and she's a Senior Executive Communications over at the Trade Desk, and this particular interview is part of our Milken Institute Global Conference 2025 coverage, where we're creating a complete interview series based on some of the people that we met, some of our future friends that all attended the Milken Conference, and we always get great guests. We've been covering that conference now for, I think, 3 or 4 years now. Time flies when you're having fun. So first off, Shelly, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Adam. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right. So first off, I know you went to the Milken Conference. I'd like to kick off the interview by just getting your impression, your thoughts, those that couldn't attend. What keeps you coming out there?
Oh, it's incredible, actually. So this is my first global conference, which was remarkable. I actually was first introduced to the Milken Institute. My first conference was actually in the Singapore one, the Milken Institute. So that was phenomenal. But then being on the home turf of LA and being there was remarkable. I mean, to me, Milken isn't just a conference. It's more like a convergence of capital, impact, and bold thinking. And I think you know this better than anyone else. I mean, it's where power meets purpose. And I felt that this year's global conference was, especially energizing. The theme was flourishing towards a better future. And so we saw dialogues around AI, clean energy, global capital shifts, Middle East, India, a lot of things, as well as chats about tariffs that we saw go into effect when Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent spoke. So it was remarkable.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It was really a remarkable experience. And I do want to take a slight diversion here because I've always been curious about the Singapore event. And I've always thought, hey, man, I want to go to Singapore. Talk to me a little bit about that. I haven't had somebody else on yet that has mentioned that particular conference, but I've always been curious about it. Like, how was the layout? What was the experience there?
It was incredible. So by serendipity, actually, so as you know, Milken, a lot of different events are happening around the same time. So at that time, the F1 race was happening in Singapore, as well as Token 2049 with blockchain, like crypto, as well as a super return for Asia. So I was actually there for some events around those. And so when I was invited to join Milken for the institute there, it was remarkable. I mean, it's a bit more intimate. I mean, it doesn't attract to, you would know, I think, how many people came this year? Maybe
I was told, I'm not gonna say that I have confirmed information. It was something like 5,000 people. It was packed. Yeah, it was quite a few
Exactly.
people.
It was packed, but it still felt in some ways that I was able to still run into people.
I mean, when I was sitting down for lunch, though, I was like hawking a seat. I'm like, where are they? Like, don't stand up. I'm gonna get you. I'm taking your seat. Don't go.
You said it so well. It was definitely, it was hard to find a seat there. And unfortunately, as you know, the weather wasn't the best until the last day. But going back to Singapore, I mean, Singapore was fantastic. It's a bit more intimate. So I'd say nowhere near 5,000, but close to maybe several hundred. But we thought the panels were incredible. I mean, obviously with the focus on Asia and Singapore itself, being such a hub for several people, investors, as you know, family offices are huge there. So heard several panels around the future of India, which is something I'm very passionate about. The large scale, the GDP is growing there, as well as other countries, and as well as very interesting conversations about longevity, which we also heard this year. Yeah. So it's a fantastic conference. And like I mentioned, it allows for a lot of events around it. So I was able to attend my first F1 race, which was incredible. And then also interact with a lot of the folks in the crypto scene and as well as on the private equity side. So I highly recommend it.
Let's go. I want to go further down that train of thought, actually, when you're talking about expectations evolving across these different geographies, because you do obviously have a worldview, like in, say, Middle East versus Asia versus the U.S. Like, how are LP expectations evolving? Like, what are you seeing?
Well said. So I really think LPs globally are no longer just seeking alpha. They want alignment. So what I mean by that is, so as you can see in the Middle East, there's been a strong appetite for long-term partnerships tied to sovereign strategy and as well as building that relationship with U.S. tech companies in the Middle East. And so when I look at that from an LP lens, you can definitely see that there's been a lot of new partnerships tied to sovereign strategy, and you'll see LPs really, they still care about performance, but they're also asking deeper questions about what's the value, what's the transparency around this. So I find that to be, and then going into Asia, I think we're seeing more tech forward, next gen wealth leaning into different, like AI, of course, is invincible, but I'm also seeing things within climate and things like that. So I think overall LPs still care about performance, but they're asking deeper questions as well about where does this really lie in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, no, that's a great observation, and I think it's going to keep evolving. And one of the things that I do like, I'm just kind of tying this back for the conference myself, is that we're all busy. Like, we're all working in our own niches. And I'll give you an example. Going to, like, I don't spend all of my days in longevity, but when I went to the conference, there was an emphasis on longevity in certain areas. So I feel like one of the, this isn't my words, another guest used this. They said it's like their brain candy for the year. Like, it's like you get to explore, and whoever's on stage, whoever's like, you got the real deal. Like, you can trust that the content there is vetted, and that the people there that are being trusted to be on stage, they're renowned experts in whatever it is they're presenting. So it's kind of like the brain candy of going around and tasting a little bit of this or that or whatever, and getting outside of maybe for me, my comfort zone, right? Like, so it's kind of cool.
Really well said, because actually this was my first global conference. I am so into the financial markets, the world markets, so I really wanted to dive into like deeper conversations. I really enjoyed those panels with Ken Griffin from Mittal, Bill Ackman on the future of education, and like Mark Rowan from Apollo and John Gray. But you bring up such a good point, because it is like I could have joined the longevity panel, which I didn't know as much about, and learned from the experts there. So I think that's even another way to look at it when you go into these other conferences next time. Like, I'm sure, did you attend the Future of Podcasting panel?
I didn't even, I'll tell you what, I didn't even know that was happening. And I'll tell you this other part of that is, this is the thing. I'm so jealous. I heard there was a wellness garden, and the thing is, I'm working. Like, I'm doing interviews, I'm doing other stuff. I'm like, nobody cares about old Adam. It's fine. No.
Oh, no, we have to get you there
behind the mic and do some talking. I'm like, okay, fine.
No, but what you're doing is super important, of course. I mean,
oh, sure. I want some wellness garden. Of course it's important. Not my wellness garden. I'm sorry.
I know.
I just came on.
No, not at all. And I know, but I actually, on the last day, I went to the wellness garden, if I'm being honest. And it was fantastic. And I was like, why didn't I come before? So next year we need to make a point.
Not a wellness garden, no.
I know.
Getting us back on track, Shelly. So you're part of the Young Leaders Circle. Maybe tell us a little bit about that first off, and really how that's shaping your evolution.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm very honored to be part of the Young Leader Circle of the Milken. It's a group of 300 folks across the world have been selected, and it's really has pushed me to think more boldly, and not just about capital markets, but more about human capital. And it's a reminder that, leadership is about access and amplification, giving back. So you just don't sit at a table, you build it. And more importantly, you make sure others have a seat too. So that's really grateful to be a part of that organization. It's a group of very curious, intellectual individuals from across the world that care about philanthropy, about different investments, where the world is heading. And it's a fantastic organization, and it really has allowed me to look at things from a different perspective and lens.
So we're recording this in May 2025. What's next for you? What's next for Shelly? What's next for your work? Like, what do you have on the agenda for the rest of the year?
Yeah. Well, I convinced you I'm going to be going to the Singapore Summit at the Asia Institute later this year. But not only that, I'm going to be kind of building out our partnerships in Singapore as well as in India, which I'm very excited about because I'm of Indian origin, and we see a lot of growth and trajectory there, as we learned at the Institute, and excited to help build stronger relationships there and grow from there, as well as attend some other conferences later down the line at Abu Dhabi as well. So I think Milken provides an amazing opportunity to really gather these leaders together and bring about change, and I'm thrilled about it.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's great, and to bring these ideas out there. I mean, this is one of my passions and my missions is to not everybody gets to attend these conferences. Not everybody gets to, but I like to think through podcasts, through sharing information, through keeping the dialogue going. That everybody has access. So that's one of my missions and one of the things I like to do as well. So, and one of the reasons I'm glad to host this series and get people on here. So that being said, Shelly, if somebody wants to follow up, if they want to learn more about the work that you're up to, whether it's at the trade desk or any of your other projects or ventures, or to follow you personally, like how do people connect? How do they keep the dialogue going?
Absolutely. And they're happy to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always very active. I love meeting people. I'm based in LA, so meeting people in the community. But if not, I'm always traveling. I'll actually be in London for a few weeks next month, working on things with the Cannes Lions Festival as well as things. But I feel like we're all global citizens, and it's great to keep in touch. So LinkedIn's fantastic, as well as, Instagram is always great. I've found that, especially as we build this community in LA, I feel like there's been a big surge of tech in DC here, and I'm finding myself meeting founders in DC from all across, and as well as LPs at different events all in LA. So happy to connect there, and I find Instagram to be a way of even just seeing where people are at different events in a more fluid way. But I think LinkedIn is fantastic as well. So
wonderful.
Always happy to chat.
Perfect. And so for everybody listening, just so you know, we'll definitely put the links in the show notes so that you can connect with Shelly. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. Each and every day we're bringing you new content, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way in your journey as well. So again, hit that subscribe or follow button. And Shelly, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Adam. Appreciate it.